Hey, welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, Check Out MPL. And today's segment is another segment of our podcast called Travel with MPL. And today we're traveling with our friend Matt to Japan. We want to take this opportunity to thank the Wisconsin Humanities for partially funding the creation of our Travel with MPL kits, as well as funding these podcasts that you're able to watch and listen to here today. So like I said, today we're here with Matt, and he has traveled to Japan and is going to share some of his experiences with us today. So Matt, if you don't mind introducing yourself a little bit more, like who you are, where you work, and maybe you could even share with us what sent you or brought you to Japan.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Matt Heindel. I actually live in Madison, and I work at the Monona Public Library. I worked at the Milton Public Library for several years before I got my full-time spot here at Monona. And yeah, my trips to Japan, I've been to Japan twice, once in 2010 and once in 2015. And spent most of the time, as you can see in the image here, in Tokyo, and then also in Yamanashi, which is basically like a straight shot west from Tokyo, a little bit north of Mount Fuji, sort of considered by some to be sort of like Japanese wine country, which I'll probably get into a little bit later on.
Awesome.
But
How long were you there those two different times?
the first time was, I think, about 10 days. And then the second time, I think, was about 5 days because we had split that up between Japan and Korea. My wife's brother and his wife were teaching in Korea, so we did a trip where we spent some time with them around Seoul, and then all four of us traveled together to Tokyo.
Sounds like we're going to have to make more kits to talk about some other locations with you, Matt.
Maybe.
So then you were just traveling for pleasure?
Yeah, I've been interested in sort of Japanese pop culture for a very long time. So kind of all the typical stuff, video games, comics, cartoons, movies, music, all that sort of stuff. And then as I got older, I became more interested in the food, especially. I've gotten very enthusiastic about food.
Mm-hmm.
And it just looked beautiful to visit. And we also knew, my wife and I knew that we had some sort of connections that we would, hopefully be able to take advantage of. And so that was kind of what pushed us in that direction.
That sounds amazing. So were you mostly in touristy areas, or would you say that you got off the beaten path at certain points? Because I know Tokyo, probably a lot of people do travel to Tokyo.
Yeah. We definitely did a lot of the sort of like popular temples and kind of well-known kind of thoroughfares and that kind of thing. But we did manage to get off the beaten path quite a bit. I've got some pictures here, for example. So like during our first trip, on the top left there is a picture. We went out to actually a sort of basically like a suburb of Tokyo called Kawasaki. I went to the Kawasaki City Museum for an exhibit by this artist that I like a lot, Yuichi Yokoyama, who does like comics, but also does sort of like other visual art. So that was great. In the bottom left, that kind of sort of like blink and you miss it little kind of stone monument there is actually at the site of the Sugamo prison, which was the Japanese prisoner of war camp. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a guard at the Sugamo camp.
Really?
So that was also during our first trip that we decided to kind of seek it out. and found it, and was definitely surreal to think that my grandfather had been standing in that same place so many years ago. Basically now, on the site, there is a giant, huge tower called Sunshine 60, that basically stands in where the prisoner of war camp used to be. So a giant office and kind of like entertainment complex building.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting. And what a tie, to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it was just very bizarre to think my grandpa had this experience and now there's this just absolutely enormous building
Yeah.
standing in its place. Um, in the center there, we did do a trip with our friends to Mount Fuji, and on the way up, they took us to this little kind of roadside restaurant where they serve like udon noodles, so kind of thick, chewy noodles. Again, sort of would have never known to have gone there. It was so good. It was just great.
It sounds
Just,
amazing.
yeah, and just a neat little, um, almost looks like a little mobile home type thing, just kind of next to the woods there. Let's see, and then that sort of dark picture there, you might be able to tell that's like a Shiba Inu that was a resident at one of the bars we went to.
Mm.
Not the friendliest actually, but was still fun to run into that. And then in the top right, um, one day when we were walking around, I think in like Shinjuku, maybe one of the neighborhoods in Tokyo, ran into this little pink bus where they were selling takoyaki, which are kind of little fried dough balls with little bits of octopus in it, which I know might not be for everybody,
Yeah.
but common snack. And decided to get some there. And the guys who were working there were, I think, stoked to have foreigners stopping and buying their snacks.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I've had similar experiences abroad where they get really, the locals anyway, get really excited, seeing you there and want to share, their lives with you for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
the locals by and large were all like very, very friendly and like appreciated any of our sort of like halting attempts to speak the language.
right.
Yeah, they were just glad that we would make an effort.
Oh, that's so gracious of everybody around the world
Yeah.
towards us. So I know you were just mentioning some of the places that you ate. I thought maybe do you have like a most memorable food experience, or because Japanese cuisine is pretty unique in and of itself. Or was just being there, the whole experience just amazing? Or did you have like one thing that stuck out to you that was pretty great?
I mean, yeah, just being there for me anyway was just the whole experience of it and being in the city, even just like taking like the metro system and the subway and just seeing everything. It's great. I loved it. But as far as notable experiences, I'm not sure where would be best to start. I've got a whole bunch here.
Oh, sure. We can go in whichever order you want. If you want to go in order of your slides, that's fine too.
Well, just thinking about notable experiences kind of on our own in the city. Um, and the top left there on our second trip, I talked about being into like Japanese music or like this sort of like Japanese like sort of pop music. There was a big kind of party basically at a club that I found out about, and basically like performers like 3 basement levels down. So each level of the basement, there was a different act playing for like all, most of the night. And it was like a great big party. The sort of performer there is a performer who goes by the name Tofu Beats, who
I love that.
who like I thought was like kind of undergroundish, but as we were walking around the city, like I saw his face on like an ad for like Apple Music or whatever. So
Oh,
um
interesting.
but obviously a energetic crowd, like yeah, and super fun. The bottom picture there is just one of many pictures I took. It's kind of hard to capture in a single picture, of a place called Robot Restaurant, which is like does ostensibly serve food, but the whole thing of it is that it's like a sort of glorified, over the top, indescribable like cabaret show. So you have all these folks dressed up, like coming out playing these like neon lit drums, and then there's like a giant robot like dinosaur and other like robots that sort of come through, and all this like music and lights, and it's just incredible. So much fun. And yeah.
Is that what the robot is too? Is it from that same rest
so,
or
so that
experience?
is no, that's different. So that's from our first trip, and that I'm not sure if anyone watching this will be familiar or not. That is a statue of a robot from like a Japanese cartoon. This was at the Studio Ghibli Museum.
Mhm. Yes, I'm
So if,
familiar with that.
okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, so if you're familiar with those movies at all, like um, My Neighbor Totoro,
Mhm.
Ponyo, all these different movies, which are just like super iconic in Japan. There's a whole museum kind of dedicated to the studio's films. Um, and so we had a chance to go there. And then this statue, this is a robot from one of those movies, Castle in the Sky. So this is on
Mm.
the roof of the museum.
Oh,
um,
neat.
and it's kind of the one of the only parts of the, and any of the stuff outdoors you can take pictures of. They don't allow you to take pictures inside, because they want you to really kind of be able to take things in. So photos
Right.
inside are prohibited.
Yeah. Is Spirited Away a Ghibli film? Yeah.
Yep, that's another
So
one.
yeah, so that's one that I included in the kit, I think. Since I don't
Yep,
have it right in front of me. Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
yeah, just a really, especially as a big fan of those movies, but I
Mhm.
would imagine even if you weren't, like, boy, you'd be won over by the time you left.
I'm sure my husband and I would really enjoy that. That's
Yeah.
right up our alley. You were traveling with your wife
Yes.
for both of the trips, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, for both of the trips, and then yeah, with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law for the second trip.
Okay, so traveling like that, were you able to interact a lot with the locals?
Um, just as far as the actual traveling itself goes, like one of the sort of big surprises, I think a lot of folks might think that traveling in a foreign country, especially sort of like you said in Japan, where the language might be a bit difficult, is incredibly easy to get around. So easy to get around, as long as you like take, a few minutes to kind of plan your route, kind of figure things out. It's really accommodating to people who don't speak Japanese. There's a lot of signage in English. The like main metro lines have either have screens that kind of show the stops coming up, or there will be a voice that announces in Japanese and English what the next stop is. It was almost like disappointing how easy it was.
Oh,
um, I mean, and once you get out of the metro system and start walking around, then things get a little bit more tricky. The addressing system in Japan is really hard to explain and difficult to wrap your head around if you're not from the area. Rather than like sort of going by like street names, it kind of radiates out.
oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we had some difficulty finding a few spots sometimes, but even getting lost is not a problem. You're going to find something interesting around just about any corner, especially in Tokyo.
I can imagine. So did you have a lot of interactions with the Japanese people?
So the slides I have here, we were really fortunate on both trips to spend like a basically like a weekend with our friend Yusan. My older brother became friends with Yusan when he was in college, and I had a chance to meet him. He was studying in the States at the time. And so when we were planning on traveling, we reached out and said, without any real expectation, saying, you know, it'd be lovely to just see you, or if you have something you could point us to, that'd be great. And he went just above and beyond. Was just an absolute gift to spend time with his family. So there's a picture, the top right, all of us with Yusan's wife Ikuko and three of his children. I believe, yeah, he has four children now. So in our first trip, we actually stayed at his house. The second time, he kind of arranged a stay at like a kind of local inn that like a friend of their family runs. So that was great to spend a lot of time with him. On the lower left corner there from our first trip, Yusan took us along to what's called an enkai, which is basically like an office party. So big party with a bunch of coworkers, or maybe former coworkers of his from like a school that he used to work at. He's a teacher. And yeah, people just get a ton of food and get a lot to drink, and it's a great time. And then on the, yeah, that's on the lower left. And then the lower right, in our second trip, we were just going to kind of like a local, basically like a townie bar, just to get some stuff to drink and get some snacks. And there was a group of like 5 or maybe 6 people next to us who were celebrating a birthday, and I think saw that we were foreigners and kind of struck up conversation. One of them had, I think, studied in the UK, so was pretty fluent with her English, and just made themselves very friendly and ordered us way too many drinks, and it was great. It was a blast.
That sounds so much fun.
Yeah, but and then other like stuff, Yusan took us to like his parents own a vineyard. Like I said, Yamanashi is like Japanese wine country, so we went to his parents' vineyard. We actually got to try some of the wine like from their estate. We went to he took us to an onsen, which is like a bathhouse, which was lovely. On our first trip, we went to like a parents' day at his child's school, which was such a privilege. Yeah, it was just the best. And then in the bottom middle there, from our first trip, we met up with a friend of a friend from when we lived in Kansas. A friend of ours there connected us with a friend of hers, and she kind of showed us around to some spots in Tokyo, in the city, which was also just really very kind.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of amazing experiences, like getting more immersed maybe than most people have the opportunity to do when they travel there.
Yeah, I think it would have been a great time even if we didn't have these local connections, but it definitely like just kind of made all the difference, as far as feeling kind of more connected with the place, and were easily some of the best experiences.
I love that. Now I'm gonna want to go. My husband's gonna ask, when are we leaving?
Yeah, well, the next sort of bunch of pictures, I'm not sure how into the food situation you are, but
Yeah,
oh man.
I can be a little bit picky, I won't lie. However,
Okay.
I'm open when I'm in other cultures. I was a foreign exchange student at one point in my life, and that forced me to kind of get into that mindset of, I'm in a different place. I need to try different things.
Sure.
So yeah.
I
But
mean,
yes, definitely tell me about the food.
yeah, I mean, and you can definitely like stretch yourself as far as you want or as little as you want. Um, but man, like um just so much incredible food. Like you can probably see a few bowls of ramen noodles there, which is some of our favorite stuff. Um, Sort of in the center right there, those things on skewers, that's called kushiage, which is basically fried food on skewers. We went to a place that's been there for like I think over 75 years or something, and just by the sound of it, fried stuff on sticks sounds kind of like unrefined. This was like just the most flavorful, kind of like surprising version of that you can imagine. Um, just next to that, to the left, um, there are really great donuts all over the city in Tokyo.
Oh,
Like really some of the best that I've ever had. Um, Over to the far right there with the kind of like mayo zigzag on it, that's okonomiyaki, which is basically like a savory pancake
mm,
with like cabbage and meat and sauce over it. Um, that's a lot of fun. In the bottom right, that you can barely see it, but that's like fried chicken over like a noodle bowl, which was so good on a hot summer day. To the left of that is a dish called chirashi sushi. So basically like a mixed
okay.
sushi that Ikuko, our friend's wife, made for us. And that the way Yusan explained it is typically more reserved for kind of like celebratory occasions. It's not like an everyday meal.
Okay.
So we were really touched that they took the time to do that. Uh,
Okay.
to the left of that, the meat on skewers, that's yakitori. That's some of the stuff that we got at that like towny bar.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
like I was just I would think that something like this would just go over so well in like any bar in Madison. And I feel like some places have tried it, but man, it's not the same. It's so good.
Yeah, it never is the same, is
Yeah,
it?
it's just ideal drinking food. Um, and then the top left, there's a bowl you might not be able to tell of. Basically it's like spicy chicken livers, so that might be pushing it a bit
Interesting.
for some folks, but and I think I was the only one who ate any of it, but I remember that was a just unbearably hot day during our second trip, and we stumbled onto this like beer festival out where Yusan, close to where Yusan lives, and there was a truck selling this stuff, and it's like, well, that sounds great. And yeah, it really uh, um, sort of revived me a bit after being out in this just brutal heat.
And
um,
you liked them.
yeah, I
Yeah,
did. I
that's cool.
it's probably not like an everyday food, but and I don't even have pictures, excuse me, of like just amazing, the best sushi of my life from this like well-known sushi chef, like not cheap, but great. My wife wasn't too fond of the sea snail.
Oh,
um, uh, but that was great. And even again, stuff that I don't have pictures of, but just like our more modest like lunches that we were just grabbing something were always like so good or just like fun. So like some grilled eel is like a typical summer food. That's so good. Conveyor belt sushi.
I was gonna
So
ask you if you'd had gone to a restaurant that did that.
yeah, so we went to that after we had like our like incredible high-end sushi. So obviously your expectation is a bit different, but that's still like fun and um relatively speaking like affordable.
Sure.
um but certainly not to the same level. There's also a great dish called tonkatsu, which is basically just like a fried pork cutlet. Um, Usually just served with a bit of like shredded cabbage. That's great. And like on our first trip, like our very first meal was some ramen, like the ramen you see there, just at a place closest to our hotel. And after being tired and starving, that was so good. I also don't have a picture of a food called natto, which is fermented soybeans. Um,
I've heard of that before, I feel like.
and yeah, that is definitely one that's not for everybody.
Oh,
It's a very particular texture, kind of slimy, but it's not an unusual thing. We actually had donuts that were made from like dried ground natto,
oh,
like it incorporated into the flour, and those were very good.
oh, delightful.
Yeah. I could,
When you
yeah,
got
please.
some of the ramen, did you ever visit you know how they have like alleyways and they're just like these little hole in the wall places that
Mhm.
sell they're like different bars and different. I've seen it on travel programs that I've watched. Did you get to experience those at all?
Yeah, there are a few different, yeah, these little alleyways they call yokcho,
Okay.
um, sort of scattered throughout Tokyo. And yeah, we did get to a few, like there's just a little bar that was like had just enough room for like, the four of us,
Sure.
and had a drink. And I think someone was like sort of leaning against like one side of the wall with their like legs over like the staircase that you come up,
Oh,
because
okay.
there was like not really any more standing room. um uh and yeah, got some food at some other spots, and those can be like hard to find, or like you're not sure if you're in quite in the right place sometimes.
Probably because they're so small, right?
Yeah. um uh but yeah, and the ramen that we get, um most ramen places, maybe you've seen this on the shows as well, you basically you put in your order by getting like a ticket from a vending machine.
Yeah, yeah.
You sort of specify all the details of your order, put money in the machine, you get like a ticket with all of the specifics of your order printed on it, then you hand them the ticket, go to your seat, and then they bring out your noodles. um,
Ah, as an English speaker, were those machines easy to use, or were there options for English or Japanese, or were they mostly pictures?
I think from what I recall, they were mostly sort of pictures. I don't think there was much English, and I think I might have like read a little bit of like some tutorials online about like, this is what this means,
Yeah,
like you probably want to get this,
right.
um, that kind of thing. Uh, but yeah, we figured it out.
That's good. That's good. So do you have any more food to show us?
No,
Okay.
I could go on and on, but no, that's plenty.
Okay. No, it all looks, a lot of it looks delicious to me and I would try it. So, um, was there any experience that you had that was really unexpected for you?
Um, like I said, really the most like unexpected thing was how easy it was to get around. Like I was
Okay.
kind of prepared, um to get lost a bit more. And when we were like out walking and trying to like look for like a very specific spot, sometimes we did get a little bit lost. Um but I don't know, aside from that, like any of the other surprises, like were, like going to that bar and just like, you know I'm sure a few drinks helped, but just like that group kind of like just like dropping right in on on our group was really certainly not something we we planned.
Right.
And yeah, you can't replicate.
No, you can't. So then on the flip side of that, was there any experience that you guys had that was maybe overrated?
Yeah, so what I would say is maybe a bit overrated. I think a lot of what you see about like Japan or trips to Japan, understandably, are all of the like temples and shrines, and they're beautiful, they're great, but I've seen some like tourist websites, I think, sometimes describe temple fatigue, and that is absolutely a real thing. Like you'll read about all of these like impressive, like different historically significant temples, but after a while, like you just kind of get exhausted by them. So it's worth seeing like maybe one or two of like the really notable ones, or if there's some sort of like significant connection or some detail about it that really draws you to it. But otherwise, like uh, that I would probably ease off of. Like we took quite a bit of time when we were in one neighborhood in uh, Akihabara, which is kind of like a like electronics and pop culture neighborhood. We searched for quite a while for a shrine that's devoted to Tanuki, which is like the sort of like mythical raccoon dog. And we did finally find it. So it's this very small like temple next to or not a temple, just a shrine, so not even the scale of a temple, next to a stream in the city, with all these little Tanuki statues all over it. And so that was cool to track down. But otherwise, yeah, it's not. Or like the one that we went to with our friend Yusan was fun and was like kind of an old castle that still had. I remember walking on these boards that gave like a really sharp, distinct kind of chirp or kind of screech. And the idea was that when, if it was like a prominent, I'm not sure politician isn't the right word, but if some sort of figure of importance, whoever it was that like stayed at the castle, if someone walked through the house at night, like maybe like a burglar or some like an assailant of some kind, these floorboards would squeak, and so that's like their alarm system.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, it was wild. uh but yeah, I would maybe be very deliberate with the sort of temples. And then, as I was saying at the start, I did and still like love sort of Japanese comics and video games and cartoons and stuff, but the sort of time that I probably spent related to like that stuff, especially related to like shopping,
Mhm.
like the shopping, of course, especially in Tokyo, is unreal and hard to resist. But that is something that, in retrospect, I would have spent a lot less time devoting attention to, because overwhelmingly the stuff that sticks in my head the most and that was the most fun was with and around other people.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
the experiences with people definitely, like, that's the sort of stuff that I would seek out the most.
right. That's really good advice, I think, for anybody traveling abroad. So it sounds like that you would definitely recommend other people to visit Japan. You seem to have a soft spot, a passionate spot for that country and culture.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm definitely biased, but yeah, I think it's just so much fun. Yeah, again, overwhelmingly people were kind and patient with us.
Right.
Uh, and yeah, especially if you're into food, like I can't imagine it getting better.
No, probably not. My husband would love it there. So then do you have any secret travel tips for Japan specifically, maybe from experiences you had that maybe you do differently?
Um, a few things kind of came to mind, like as far as like the actual travel experience goes, as you might expect, it's a very long trip to get there. But then once you actually get to the airport is a good like hour and a half outside of the city. So it's going to take a little while longer to actually get like to the city or wherever you're staying. It's going to like at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So just to be prepared for the little bit of extra travel tacked on. Getting around like in the city and in the country, there are a few different options. There's something called a JR pass, Japan Rail, which is something that is made available specifically for foreigners. It's kind of like it's like a one-time charge that gets you on like most of the major rail systems throughout the country. So if you're traveling back and forth like all over Japan, it's probably a good option. When we traveled both times, we were really mostly in the city or just going a bit outside of the city. And in that case, there are basically like Metro cards. There's one called like Suica, Suica, and another called Pasmo, Pasmo. Both of those you basically just load with credit. You just kind of tap at the kiosk as you're going in and out of a station, and it kind of debits the credit that you put on the pass, and that worked really well for us. Another bit of advice as far as staying somewhere, like there are plenty of like super ritzy, really nice hotels. We stayed at kind of like a more modest ryokan, which is sort of like more of a traditional inn. So like the one that we stayed at, like they have the sort of tatami, like kind of rice straw floors, and you sleep on the floor, which is, at least for me, I remember being actually pretty comfortable. And the ryokans can be like fairly modest. The one we stayed at was like a room that was basically as wide as my arms, to like really elaborate, where like you get like really elaborate like multi-course meals. They have like nice baths on site and stuff. We didn't stay at one quite so ritzy, but the ryokan inns are, I would say, the way to go, as opposed to like Western style hotels.
Sure.
They've got amazing versions of that too. And then both of our trips, we went in summer, like I think either late June or late July, but anyway, like right in the middle of summer. It gets just oppressively humid or just straight up rainy around that time. To give you an idea, it's like Tokyo is at like a similar latitude to like North Carolina.
Oh, okay, that is helpful.
So if possible, if anyone plans to go, and you can, you're not obligated to stick to like a teacher's summer schedule, going in the spring or the fall is probably advisable.
Oh, that's really good information to have, actually, because sometimes you just don't think about that.
Yeah. My wife works in the schools and is kind of tied to the school calendar, so we didn't have a ton of choice there. And we'd love to go someday, when the weather's a bit nicer, because they have incredible like foliage in the fall, and then of course in the spring they have their infamous cherry blossoms.
That's right. Yeah.
But even in summer when it's hot, as long as you stay well hydrated, it'll still be a great time.
That's amazing. So it definitely lived up to your expectations. Is that right?
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go back in a heartbeat. We haven't been back since we now have a almost 3-year-old, but I would,
Mhm.
once he's a little bit older and can tolerate long travel, especially a bit better. Yeah, I'd love to go back and especially get outside of the Tokyo area. Really love to go to like Kyoto and Osaka and some of the other parts of the country.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your experiences and all of your pictures. And right now, again, I'll remind everybody that we do have our travel kit to check out. And something I forgot to mention earlier is that there's also a cookbook in there. So a lot of the food that Matt shared, I believe, is probably in there. So if you want to try your hand at home, you can get our kit and go to town.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, Matt, for all of the information. And I hope that you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.